My affirmation has always been, I am strong, I am fit, I am healthy. A few months ago I had it's like a breakthrough where when I was meditating, the thought came to me that I have to accept myself, because I was always fighting against like being sick and I'm tired and I've got sore legs and that. So my affirmation now is, I accept myself, I love myself, I am happy.
My name's Adrian, I'm 32, I'm from Morwell in Gippsland in Victoria. I'm married and I've got a 3-month-old daughter named Miller.
I have Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia, which is a form of lymphoma. It's one of the rarer forms of lymphoma. I'm a retired physical education teacher, and for the last few years I've just been concentrating on taekwondo, which I've been doing for 40 years. I'm an instructor, and I run a taekwondo club with my wife Bronwyn.
I've been in Australia for 40 years, originally from Ireland. My husband and I came here, and we got married in Ireland, came here, and have 2 children here, and are very happy in Australia. I'm a teacher by profession. I'm now retired, and have recently become a grandmother.
I'm also a volunteer driver with the Leukemia Foundation, which has been a great opportunity for me over the last couple of years. I was originally put onto the Leukemia Foundation by my oncologist, Joe, because he thought it would be a place that I could pick up some information.
It all began, I had a really bad cold, and I just thought I was a bit tired, run down. It was actually the week before our wedding. So we're running around, and I just thought, it was just part of the wedding, and I felt a little lump on the side of my neck. And I sort of thought, that's a bit strange, and had the wedding, went on our honeymoon, and at the end of our honeymoon, I started getting these night sweats. I was waking up saturated. I'm thinking, this isn't right. And I was getting really tired. So we come back from our honeymoon and went to the doctor, and the doctor done a heap of tests and stuff. So we went to Africa, and I thought maybe I picked up a bug or a virus or something like that. So they checked every blood test I could have and went right over me, and they sort of couldn't pinpoint what the problem was. And then they done a biopsy on my neck, and they told me it was Hodgkin's lymphoma.
I guess looking back in hindsight, I was very tired, but I put that down to my age. At the time I was 49, and I was thinking change of life, but I was fatigued a lot. What took me to the doctor was heartburn and indigestion. He prescribed some medication, it didn't work. I went back 2 weeks later. He prescribed some stronger medication, which didn't work. Then he sent me off to have a gastroscopy. They were looking for an ulcer, which I didn't have. Went back again to the doctor. He prescribed some other medication, which again didn't work. He decided to do an ultrasound. The ultrasound showed a mass in my abdomen. He then sent me to the hospital where they did a CT scan and told me that I had cancer. At that stage, they didn't know what type of cancer, and I was admitted to hospital.
At the time I was in Korea. We went over for a competition at a place called Muju. We were training 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours at night for the 3 days. And I wasn't used to training that hard. Every day I'd get really swollen ankles. I had cankles, not nice. When I came home, my legs were still aching. And I took the dog for a walk and got to the bottom of the street, and I thought, this is crazy. And I thought, well, I'll ring up the doctor and make an appointment.
Initially, I was just shocked and stunned. I didn't know anything about lymphoma, and it felt like it was just a merry-go-round of, tests, blood tests, CT scans, ultrasounds, bone biopsies. It was just an unbelievable experience that you're suddenly in hospital with very little control of what's happening, and all of a sudden you're told that you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Eventually I saw a doctor who suggested that I have my IgM tested. The doctor rang me, which was rather unusual, and he'd already made an appointment for me to go and see him the following morning, which he'd never done before, and so that's when I started panicking slightly. Biopsy came back positive for Waldenstrom's, but the scan was clear, so I had no associated cancers in the lymph nodes or any of my organs, so that was good.
Oh, you're sort of shocked at the start, then sad, and I think you go through all the emotions in one, and then in the end all I wanted to do was just fight it and get rid of it and stay positive.
The night after I had the sort of IgM spike, I went home and Googled IgM spike, and it came up with the two things, Waldenstrom's and whatever the other thing is, I can't remember. And I clicked on Waldenstrom's, and it's the first thing I read was life expectancy 2 to 5 years, so I turned the computer off. And that was like the first I'd heard of Waldenstrom's, and I was a phys ed teacher, so I understood basic anatomy and circulatory system, blood, lymph, so I knew that it existed and that it was vaguely a blood cancer, but that was all.
I don't think I had a lot of information before I started treatment. Because I was sent to an emergency room at a hospital, they did a CT scan and I was immediately admitted to the hospital. The only information that I got was from the nurses and from the doctor. And initially that was very limited until they found out exactly what sort of cancer I had. And then it was fed to me very slowly, the information about the treatment and the outcomes and the side effects. It was all given to me very slowly. I guess it took a lot of time for me to absorb all that information. And it was really only after that I'd finished the first lot of treatment that I was able to seek information out myself from different organisations.
I knew a little bit about it. I knew that Dr. Goodrum had it. And that was basically it. My sister did have it when she was very young, but I was young too, so I sort of didn't really... I knew she had chemo and that was about it. I didn't really have much from that. I knew she was sick after she'd had her chemo, and because anti-nausea drugs weren't as good back then and stuff like that, but basically from the doctors, whatever they explained to me, and from then on I sort of learnt. The more I did, the more I'd learn, and the more the doctors would explain what was happening, and that was great. Like they kept me up to date with what was happening. But with my stem cell transplant, Steve from the Leukemia Foundation told me a lot as well. So he gave me a lot of info, and which was good. They give you like a different perspective from the doctors. So then I sort of worked out from that, from what the doctor said and from what he said, and from there on I sort of went my own way, sort of thing. But it was good to have a bit of insight.
I wish I'd known more about lymphoma. I wish I'd had contact with the Leukemia Foundation, because I've had so much support over the last couple of years from them that I just didn't know of their existence 13 years ago. And after my initial treatment, I hadn't any support groups or anything to go to, and it's only within the last 2 to 3 years that I've been involved with the Leukemia Foundation and found their support groups really useful and really informative.
I was sitting in the oncology day ward one day, and there was 4 or 5 of us around a little circle chatting away, and I said to the chap opposite me, what have you got? And he said lymphoma, and I said, what type? And he said non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I said, yeah, but what type? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, there's over 30 different types of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he went, oh, really? When I started having the rituximab, the infusions, the nurses that work in the oncology ward are brilliant, and they gave me a heap of stuff to read, and sat down with me and asked me if I had any questions, and to make sure that I was comfortable with everything. So yeah, it's a couple of years ago now, but I remember that process being quite thorough, so it sort of makes you a bit more confident. I think sometimes doctors try to work out how much information they should give a patient based on just their reading of the patient, and quite often they'll keep information back. I had a hip replacement several years ago, and I remember before the surgery asking the surgeon, so how do you actually get the hip out? And he looked at me and he sort of said, and I could see this thought process, like, should I really tell him or not? And he said, oh, okay, we bend your knee up and we do that and it pops your hip out. Oh, okay. So I've spoken to a lot of other cancer patients since, and a lot of them have this belief that their doctors, not so much that they're trying to keep information from them, but they're trying to work out how much information should I tell you? And, you know, do you really want to know?
I've actually had a lot of treatment for lymphoma. I was first diagnosed with a B-cell lymphoma and had treatments of CHOP, and then 6 weeks of radiotherapy. After that, 2 years later, unfortunately, it came back, but they adopted a watch and wait procedure with me, and they watched and waited for 4 years until it broke out in my neck and under my arm, and they decided that I needed some more treatment. At that point, I had some CVP with MAPTHERA maintenance.
The main criticism of Waldenstrom's treatments in the past has been that doctors were too keen to treat. And the recommendation now seems to be wait and see what happens, which can be a bit counterintuitive at times, but you know, it is sort of more or less the agreed treatment now. Of course, I'm not a doctor and don't know that much about it, but wait and watch didn't worry me. The only thing that worried me was, why am I so tired? And why do my legs hurt? So I started off on chlorambucil, which is just a little tablet, and I think it was 6 tablets every morning. You keep them in the fridge. As Joe explained to me, it's a very mild form of chemotherapy. Doesn't even make your hair fall out, which is good.
I'd only finished the MAPTHERA maintenance, which was for 2 years. I'd only finished that 5 months when the cancer came back again, the lymphoma came back again. It was low grade. So I had some more MAPTHERA, 4 in a row, and then a gap of 6 months and another 4 in a row. Unfortunately, the first 4 in a row shrunk the tumour, but the second lot didn't, and it had started to grow again.
After a couple of months, he decided to include rituximab, which is the one you have the infusion for. And so I was on R-CHOP for about 7-8 months.
So I had 12 cycles of chemotherapy, my first treatment, and it worked, and it was gone for good. That's what they told me. I had 3 months reviews, and before my last 3rd month I felt a lump on my neck again, and it returned. So that sort of put a spanner in the works, and I sort of thought, oh no, it's back again. And then went back to my oncologist, had more scans and stuff like that, and they basically told me I had to have a stem cell transplant. They sort of said your immune system's going to be nothing, you're going to feel horrible, but until you experience it yourself, you sort of don't know what to think. Yeah, you could feel your body, and you have a blood test every day, and you see all your blood counts, and they hit rock bottom, and like there's nothing, and you think, if I get one little thing, I'm going to be really sick. But then, yeah, you watch them slowly kick back in, and you come good, and you go home. But yeah, it took a while. That was probably the hardest thing. And then I had radiation after that, and that was for a month. And the radiation was pretty good. It sort of got bad sunburn on the areas they treated. But apart from that, I was pretty good. That was a breeze, if you could call it that.
Since then, my bloods have been constant. They dropped for about 18 months, and now they're quite low and constant. I don't have any treatment at all now.
It wasn't in my bone marrow, and they decided, well, they wouldn't do the stem cell transplant, and because it was localized in my abdomen again, that they'd do some more radiotherapy. So I had another 4 weeks of radiotherapy, and then again went back on the maintenance MAPTHERA. So that was another 2 years of treatment for that. The treatment I'm having at the moment is maintenance treatment. I tolerate it really well. It keeps me really well, and I'm more than happy to have that every 2 months. And the way I look at it is, if I was a diabetic, I'd be on insulin 3 times a day. If I've got to go into day chemo once every 2 months and have some treatment, well, that's the way it is. It's a difficult time, treatment. I would never tell anyone it's easy, but I wouldn't be alive today if I hadn't had the treatment that I have.
I think the hardest thing is telling your family and friends, because they sort of don't know how to react. And I don't want people to feel sorry for me either, so I didn't want to tell them for that reason. I reckon it's harder for the people close to you than it is for yourself, like for my wife and stuff. And my family and friends, it was a lot harder, I think, than me.
The first thing I did was I wrote an email. Now, at that stage, I was pretty emotional, and I didn't want to ring up all my brothers and sister and friends and that sort of thing. So I basically wrote this generic email and sent it to all my close friends and family members. So that saved me making those telephone calls.
When you have treatment and you are sick, you find out who your friends are. Some people who I considered acquaintances were extremely good to me when I was sick, driving me to and from radiotherapy appointments. My husband always took me to chemo, but with radiotherapy being every day for 6 weeks or for 5 weeks, my husband couldn't take time off every day to take me to the hospital. So some friends who I considered only acquaintances stepped up and offered to drive me. And, one person would do it every Tuesday, one person would do it every Thursday. Other people that I considered my friends dropped off very quickly. So it gave me a new perspective on who my friends were and what type of friendship was important.
Bronwyn, my wife, was still overseas at the time, so it was like just trying to get the information out there without, because she didn't know anything about this until she came back to Melbourne. So, yeah. She was competing at the World Championships in Russia, and I didn't want her to know. I didn't want anything to affect her, performance. So it was a interesting conversation in the car on the way home from the airport. But yeah, she's been really good. She's a rock. She's quiet, but she's never sort of broken down and become hysterical or any of that sort of thing. So that's been helpful, having someone that was confident and just positive.
It was hard seeing them go through it. I think my wife, it was hard watching her. She'd come in every day and sit beside me, and it would have been that boring for her. Some days I just couldn't be bothered doing anything. And yeah, so family and friends are a big part.
I don't know if there was a single thing that was the most helpful in managing lymphoma. I try and eat a healthy diet. I try and exercise, but it's fairly gentle.
I liked going back to work, so after my first lot, every fortnight I'd go back to work, and that was good for me because you forget about being sick, and then it's a bit of a physical job, so that was a little bit harder, trying to, your body's run down a little bit, but you still try and do what you can. You forget that you're sick, and those few days you go back to work, so it's good. Takes your mind off it, or for me it did anyway. Took my mind off it and sort of put a bit of normality back into my life.
I do love driving for the Leukemia Foundation. It's been a great opportunity to meet people.
Even during my chemotherapy, when I lost a lot of weight and didn't want to eat, one of the things, it sounds silly, but one of the things I enjoyed was watching cooking programs. And it was something I would do even if I felt really bad and didn't feel like getting up on a particular day. I'd get up and watch a cooking program. I never cooked the things I saw on the television, but I enjoyed it. And I think people have to find out what works for them. Some people like music, some people like relaxation, some people like to read. For me, it was watching cooking programs. Now that I'm well, it's one of the things I do enjoy. I enjoy cooking, I enjoy baking, I enjoy having people over. So you've got to find out what works for you and how to relax during your treatment.
Taekwondo does help because it gives me an outlet and it's a positive thing. The other thing that's been helping me is yoga. So I've been doing yoga for about 2 years.
Yeah, you sort of just go through it and deal with it. I just took it a day at a time.
I think the biggest emotional thing for me was the fact that I was going to give up work after my third treatment, my third lot of treatment. I took a long time to come to terms with that, and I had a lot of pressure from different people saying, make a decision, are you going back to work, are you not going back to work? And that was a very difficult time for me. I stuck my heels in because I'm a bit of a stubborn person at times, and decided, well, no, I was going to take my time to come to that decision, and I'm glad I did. I took probably about 12 months to come to the realisation that, yes, it was time for me to retire and that I wasn't going back to work.
Just before I was diagnosed, me and my wife were married, and then I was diagnosed and said, you're going to have chemo, which will probably reduce the chances of you ever having kids. And I've gone, oh, that's not good. And our oncologist said, you could go to an IVF clinic and have your sperm frozen for later on. And I thought, oh, well, that's a great idea, because if there's no second chance, you're not going to go, oh, well, I'll do that later, and then it's too late. So I went and had that done, and I went through my 12 cycles of chemo, and they said I was in remission. So then we rang the IVF clinic up and said, oh, this is what's happened, blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh, yeah, come in and see us. And they used my frozen sperm, and it worked great, and I got a little baby girl out of it. So that